This is Inside Mside, your favorite podcast for all things Morningside. Here's stories from students, alumni, faculty, and more about what makes the Morningside experience so special.
Welcome, everyone, to Inside Mside. This is the podcast for all things Morningside. My name is Carly Hanson. I'm filling in today for Alex Waters. I am the Associate Vice President for Marketing and Communication here at Morningside University. You may notice that I also sound a little stuffy today, so if you wanted to listen to a podcast by someone who has a cold, you've actually come to the right place. So today I have with me Mside Sheppard, Andre McWell, and Jemar here to just kind of talk about their experience here at Morningside, especially the student of color experience, and Andre's position as the Director of Diversity and Persistence. So I'll turn it over to you guys. Sage, if you want to start with just your name, your major, and your year in school.
So like she said, my name's Sage. I'm a sophomore here at Morningside. I'm a business administration major with an emphasis in marketing.
All right. My name is Andre McWell. I'm the Director of Diversity and Persistence here at Morningside University, and I've been here, since 2001.
My name is Jemar, and I am a senior, double majoring in business administration and public policy.
Wow. Well, thank you guys so much for being here today. I know it took us a while to tread through all of our email chain to figure out exactly when they were going to do this, so I appreciate your patience. And to be here on such a windy day, to walk all the way here, I know that it's just another day in Iowa for us. So I'm going to start with you, Sage. So actually, you are kind of the reason we're here today. So after we launched Inside Mside, a few weeks ago, you had reached out, stopped by, and just mentioned that you were interested in sharing your story about coming to Morningside. So can you tell me a little bit about how you found Morningside and maybe how that experience, both being here, coming from Colorado, I believe, yes, and then also being here as a student of color was kind of different than maybe your expectations?
So really I found Morningside. So I have a brother here as well. He's a senior. But I found Morningside through him. I wanted a smaller college/university feel because I like having the one-on-one with my professors. I would like them to know my name. If they see me in the grocery store, I want them to know who I am. So that's really what brought me here, and the incredible scholarship opportunities, of course. But being a student of color, I went to a predominantly white high school, so this isn't much different than my high school, but I didn't want it to hold me back. I didn't want to feel I can't go there because it's predominantly white.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really want that to matter. And also a way to change that is by going to a university and bringing yourself as a student of color to that university. So yeah. I think that it's important to try and branch out and find new places to go. So that's really why I came here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And since being here, you're a sophomore, right? So yes. What have these 2 years been like for you? Have there kind of been some standout moments where you were like, wow, this really was the place for me?
Yeah. So I'm on the cheer team also, but I just think this place feels like home since it is smaller. Like I said, my professors really know me. They've stopped me outside of class and asked me how I'm doing just because it is the smaller college feel. But being here, it feels like home because I don't think I have as much of a barrier between the other people in my class. We see each other on a daily basis. It's a smaller campus, so I see them all the time. And I think people here are just exceptionally friendly. Even coming from Colorado Springs, I didn't think it was as friendly in Colorado Springs as it is here. I think people are a lot more personable. So that's been really welcoming here. And especially, of course, being a student of color and having clubs like the Diversity Club and seeing that on campus is really encouraging because even though I might not have time to go to the meetings, it's still encouraging to know that there are people like Andre here who are willing to step up and say, okay, I want this to be a known part of the campus. Yeah. And I think that was really welcoming.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that actually kind of transitions really well to Jemar. So, speaking of these opportunities we've had, especially in recent years, to talk more about not just diversity on campus, but in the Siouxland area. We've got a ton of great activists and leaders here in Siouxland who are really driving attention and engagement to those conversations. And so, Jemar, you recently hosted our first ever Diversity in Siouxland panel as part of your work with the ODK Honor Society. And I know we worked with you as members of Morningside's DEI committee, that's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, along with Morningside's Diversity, Openness, and Together student group. So can you kind of talk about what was that process like for you to connect with these leaders in Siouxland who have really made a difference and then invite them to share their experience with other students?
Yeah, good question. So the experience in a whole, I'd say it's simply put, was rewarding. So it birthed out of our leadership book that ODK read. So you want to talk about race. And so I, as president, was tasked with, organizing an event about that or something relatedly. And so I decided, well, to be representative of all of the diversity that we have in Siouxland, gender, sexuality, and much more, why don't we extend this and represent all of that? And so came the panel. And so I think the process of doing so required me to almost push myself and learn about different facets of the Siouxland area that I hadn't known or interacted with before. And that was meeting with the external stakeholders. It was interacting with those minority-owned businesses for a raffle and supporting them and sponsoring them at our event. So all of that, I think there was 3 of us that spearheaded that. And so 3 representatives, myself from ODK, DOT, and then the DEI committee. It was a lot of work, more than one would maybe anticipate. But like I said, incredibly rewarding. And it's an imperative cause. As Sage said, this is a predominantly white Caucasian campus. And so I think there needs to be, and there has to be conversations about that. And that's not a bad thing. It's a leadership and growing opportunity. And I think everyone here on campus really does at some point want to learn and grow within that capacity to learn more on how they can be allies and advocates. And so that's what kind of inspired me to host the panel.
Yeah. And I mean, like, as someone who attended that night, I would say it was a huge success. I know I have told you an embarrassing amount of times now how well it went.
Well, I appreciate
I
it.
thought that it was really good. And I think, when people think about this diversity, equity, inclusion work, it can feel overwhelming. It can feel like, how are we supposed to approach this, especially at a college that has been historically and predominantly white? But we do have, diversity of our own. And so how can we shine a light on it? And like Sage said, like, inspire other students to see themselves here, to be like, I could be the change. I could be the reason that, we change what our student body looks like. And so actually, Jemar, I didn't ask you this, but can you kind of talk about what brought you to Morningside? Because I know you are from Cedar Rapids, I believe, correct?
Correct, Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Yep, so the eastern side of the state. So I had initially committed to Iowa State, and I was almost opposite of Sage. I was opposite of Sage at first. I did not want to go anywhere too smaller, and I guess Ames is substantially smaller than Cedar Rapids, but closer to Des Moines, right? And I wanted to go to a large university for the reason of diversity. And so I had committed, but I had a teacher in high school that came up here for a short time to profess. And she was like, Jemar, just come on up, just check it out. Like, great opportunities, scholarship package. The adventure program at that time was still existing, and the XPath. And so which all aligns with my personal values and interests and aspirations. So I was like, you know what? Why don't I just do it? What's there to lose, right? And so I came up here and was on my tour, and which we say commonly on our tours is, you're going to find your family here. And I felt like I immediately did, just on that initial 2-hour tour. And so from there, the great financial aid package and the opportunities to both grow myself professionally and academically is what brought me here.
Yeah. And I mean, I know too, as part of, the program that initially brought you here was the Project Siouxland initiative, which is really hands-on and really kind of aligns with Morningside's emphasis on experience.
Yep.
And I think that has been very, very visible in your experience here, as you have been highly involved. We see you all over campus. Sometimes it truly is like, does Jemar sleep? Because I actually see him literally at everything all the time. And so I'm glad to hear that, even though you initially had different expectations, that when you came here, you still found what you were looking for.
And even better.
Yeah, and even better. Yeah. We won't tell anybody you were thinking about going to Iowa.
Right. Yeah,
even though actually this is on video, so we won't be telling people. So kind of going back to the panel a little bit, and you kind of touched on this, but why do you think it's important for Morningside specifically, and like Morningside students, to host these kind of events about diversity, equity, inclusion, whether it's just, relying on our campus community or inviting the Siouxland community to be a part of it?
Yeah. I do want to make one note back to say, just point of being a change agent. I think that was a great opportunity that we had, or we do have here on campus, is being a person of color and myself of the LGBT community, is being that advocate and standing up. You are the change agent, because I think once we stand in solidarity and advocate for these things, I think it invites our peers to come along as well. And so I think that kind of goes into your question of, I think it's important because people do want to learn, but these conversations can be offsetting, uncomfortable, and people think they need to be political, and they actually don't. It's more of a human-to-human and societal conversation on how we can be better together. And so I think using that lens and knowing that people do want to grow and that there are issues that need to be resolved, but then also highlighting the beauty of diversity. It does exist, and sometimes people don't even realize that. And so I wanted to elevate that and uplift that for them to see that and showcase the opportunities for them to be advocates, to get more involved, and and to be allies, I think,
Yeah.
would be to answer that question.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No,
if
I think
anything
you
else.
answered that question.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think you mentioning like the LGBTQ plus community, for instance. I think that oftentimes when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, we talk about all these different communities, but we don't always talk about the fact that they're intersectional, that they intersect with one another. Like we can talk about a student who is Asian and they may also be gay, and those are two different marginalized communities that they are a part of, that they are representing, and that they deserve to have allyship and support for. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that, it's not just about race. There are many different ways that we need to focus on inclusion.
Yeah, and I think the last point I wanted to make was just pushing my peers to see through a different lens and a different worldview. And I think we probably know the saying, minority majority by 2040 or 2050. I may be wrong on the statistic, but that's important because we all know diversity leads to more success within a society and within whatever organization you're working in.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So speaking of kind of, director of diversity type stuff over here, I hear we've got Andre McWell in the building.
Yeah.
So Andre, like you mentioned, you've actually been here since 2001, I think, in a different student success position, and then also helping coach track.
Mm-hmm.
But can you kind of talk about what you did before you got into this role, and kind of how your perspective on student success fits into this position?
Absolutely. Prior to having the opportunity to take this role, my job was to reach out to the students that it was more geared towards students that may have been retention risk, and making sure that they were going to be able to find success on this campus, making sure that the transition from high school to college was going to be a smooth transition, and being the support that they needed. I was a stopgap no matter what issue they had, whether it was financial aid, whether it was in the classroom, whether it was in the dorms. They always knew that my door was open for them to come and visit with me, and just knowing that they had support on this campus no matter what issue or I can say success or failure that they faced. And I think now the role that I take now it's exciting because it's opened me up to the entire campus.
Yeah.
When I was just student success, I would meet other students outside the list of 25 or 30 I might have, because one of my students would bring in one of their peers that was going through the same thing, and they knew that, hey, I have support. This guy might be able to help my peer as well. So the opportunity to accept the position of Director of Diversity and Persistence, I jumped at based on it gave me the opportunity to work with every student on this campus. Okay, and I know some people saw me as a track coach. Some people just saw me, let's just be real, as the black guy that walks around campus, and there's not very many.
You do wave at me every time you walk by. I do appreciate that.
Exactly, and so just keeping it real like that, So knowing that my job is not just in athletics, but more importantly, my job, I can touch so many more students and assist in so many more students' experiences on this campus with the position that I have now.
Yeah. And I think that, that ties really wonderfully into what Jemar and Sage have touched on, which is that, when we talk about doing this work around DEI, it's not confined to just these bubbles. It has to be bigger than that. We have to be talking about student success in a different way, because, for you to be able to work with all of these students really changes the game for student success, because it's like you said, if one student sees you helping them, there may be 3 more students that notice now that you're available as a resource.
Absolutely.
And so in this position, now that your scope has kind of broadened, what would you say are some of the goals you have, or some of the common challenges and solutions you see with students?
I would say that the number one goal is to make sure that every single one of our students on this campus, no matter what they look like, no matter what they believe, no matter how they identify, they feel comfortable in this environment. Okay, they all should receive the same opportunity at the great education they're going to get on this campus, and just education. He said it. She's brought it in as well, and I think the more that we are able to educate our students as well as our staff and our faculty. And the more open and more free that we can be, the better this campus is going to be. And I think that's my goal.
Yeah.
My goal is any student that walks through my door, or if I hear a story and I can reach out, I want to do that because I want every student on this campus to know that this is a safe place. More importantly, this is a place where you're going to be able to be you as well as get the education that you're paying for. Mm-hmm. And when you leave here, go do great things.
Yeah. And I think, Sage, you kind of touched on this too, that like when you came here, it felt like home, or like you said, Jemar, when people go on tours, you tell them you're going to find your family here. And I think that it's because of people like Andre that, they feel supported, they feel heard. And Andre is, one of many faculty and staff on campus who make that a priority to seek out students who maybe could be facing challenges or don't know who to connect with. And so I think that there's a multitude of students who feel that, even if you don't hear from them all. I think we hear their stories later. We have alumni come in all the time to be on the podcast, and they say these things, and I think, the professor or the faculty or staff member who impacted them doesn't even know till years later just how much it meant to them. So I think it's really important.
Absolutely.
Kind of tying into your student success piece, especially with, that transition from high school to college, one of the things I wanted to ask you about was our Nicholas Academic Center partnership. Yes. So you work very closely with the NAC Center, as we call it here on campus, which is a partnership we have with like an after-school tutoring and mentoring program in Santa Ana, California.
Yes.
And so I think that always surprises people that we kind of have this sort of like low-key pipeline to Santa Ana, California, of all places.
Yes.
But the students who come from there, I know I've met Blanca, for instance, like they are wonderful, they are hardworking, and they come here because they want an experience that's different than the one they had at home. So can you talk a little bit about that program?
Absolutely. It's a program that President Reinders, I want to say, I think it's 12, 13, I think it's been going on 12 or 13 years. It's about connections that were made years and years prior. And I believe it was in Allegheny University in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And two men who wanted to help students that wanted to be better. And give them opportunities that unfortunately maybe their family lives would not allow that to happen. And so then the opportunity, so that kind of is, that's kind of a brief, history. But I will say this: first time I got an opportunity to go out to Santa Ana and Orange County, and I tell this story, and it's real quick. The only part of Orange County I ever saw, and I didn't watch MTV, but when commercials came on, okay, I'm like, I get off the plane and I'm looking and I'm like, okay, there's not rich white people around here right now. It wasn't the Orange County that I expected, which was exciting because, I think for me to go and get to go into those centers and see those kids taking time out of their, you get out of school and some of these kids are walking miles to get to the center because they want something better for themselves and for their parents to give up so many things to make sure that their kids have the opportunity to have more than what they had. And so getting those students out here in this environment, I always tell them that they can come here and change the game. And they are going to get a chance to become so, as I heard Jemar say, in the next 20 years, what's this world going to look like? And I always encourage those kids because a lot of them are Spanish speaking. Speak your Spanish. Be comfortable being who you are. Don't lose who you are because there are kids that will never make it to California.
Yeah.
So you are bringing California to them. And I tell them the same thing. There are people that in California that will never make it to Iowa. When you go home, you get to take Iowa to them. It's all about educating. It's all about getting a chance to be who you are. And I think that's what the Nicholas Academic Center, they have students all over the United States and the world. And so to work with those kids, it's always a blessing because it keeps things in perspective for me.
Yeah.
That sometimes I can get caught up in thinking, everyone gets this chance, and they don't. And so it is. So I they come here and there are leaders there in California in their high schools, and I encourage them to do the same thing here. Again, it's about education, because when you think of a student that's diverse from California, you think TV shows is gangs. And though these kids grow up in gang-infested neighborhoods, they're not gang members. And so the opportunity for them to get out, that is what's inspiring for me with the NAC. And knowing that these kids are leaving their families, and some of these kids don't go home for 4 years. They are here for 4 years, and their parents come out and see them at graduation. It's near and dear to me because I become their parent for the next 4 years. Okay, and so the exciting thing for me is to watch them walk across the stage out in front of Lewis Hall at graduation time, and knowing and then hoping that their parents are able to make it. That's why we go to that's why that relationship was built, and the goal is 4 years, degree, and I always tell them it's a business trip.
Yeah.
It is. It's a business trip. Every decision you make here is a business trip. It's a business decision that's going to affect the experience you have in the trip and the goal that we have in mind, which is to walk across the stage. So the NAC is something that will always be near and dear to me, and I am so happy for the students that we have here and the students that are coming to visit next week.
Oh.
Wow, that's
Yes,
exciting.
absolutely.
Yes,
Absolutely.
How many do
And
we
we're
have?
like, and by the way, come see the NAC
5.
students
Well,
next
I
week.
think there's 5 students that are coming. I
Wonderful.
think
Good.
3 young ladies and 2 guys
Good.
that are coming to check out the campus, and which is exciting because of COVID, we haven't had those students on campus to visit the last 2 years.
Yeah. Okay.
So the last 2 classes have come blindly. They've come here except for looking at a video saying, okay, this is great. So at least we get them on campus. So if you see them, please, I don't have to worry about it. They're going to have a great experience because of our students on our campus as well as our faculty.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, like, we've been talking a lot about how it's all about education, educating people. And I think the one word that comes to mind for me is it really builds a bridge between people.
Absolutely.
We often use the word kind of like a pipeline when we talk about the connection between Morningside and the NAC program, but it really is more of a bridge that connects those 2 areas that probably wouldn't be connected for any other reason.
Absolutely.
I mean, even Colorado Springs for you, Sage, is kind of like the path that brought you here is almost kind of random. You know, your brother was here and then you decided to come here, and if your brother had gone somewhere else, who knows, you know? And so I think that it just really illustrates the importance of forging those connections and kind of bringing it into, like, when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, it's about making all of us part of that, like, broader global community, our national community, regional community. And I think that's what all of this is kind of about.
Absolutely.
So.
And as you say that, the bridge.
Yeah.
I've got 2 quick, out in California, random store, guy asked me why I'm here. Out in California, I told him I'm here for the NAC, and he goes, are you from Morningside? And I had nothing that said Morningside on me. I said, what? And I thought it was getting punked, so I'm looking around. And he flat out said, he goes, I was looking into Morningside. And I was like, really? He goes, you're from Iowa? And I said, yeah. And he goes, Morningside. He goes, I applied, but it just didn't work out. And then 2 weeks ago, spring break, I'm talking to a person from Colorado Springs. I mentioned her name. The young man, he's a track kid. I was recruiting. Young man, I know those 2. I said, you and your brother. And he was like, I know who those 2 are.
Wow.
So yeah,
It's such a small world.
That is
and when I said they were here, you could hear a calm on his voice on the phone, like, okay, if they're there, it could be an okay place for me, So absolutely that bridge. So I these 2 are near and dear to me because I met her through her brother, and I know I had the chance to meet her lovely mother, and this guy here is all over the place. And like you said, and I think we couldn't ask for 2 better representatives. I mean, we have someone in athletics, which is cheer, and then we have this young man that is handling business outside of athletics. Not saying that she's not, but this is the experience
Yeah,
that
it really
they
illustrates how comprehensive the student experience can be.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, like you can be as involved in as many things as you want.
Yes.
It can be athletics. It can be, more of the student groups and the honor societies. I know that Jemar's got some pretty sweet job offers on the table, and so like these are the kind of student success pieces that all add up at the end.
Absolutely.
To be like, what these students come here for 4 years or however long they're
Yes.
here, and they grow, they turn into adults, and it really is, like not to get sappy on you guys, but it
Right.
really is an honor to be a part of it.
It is.
I think for those of us who are here
Yes.
as staff members and
Yes.
faculty members, it means a lot, especially during this time where we're talking more about how can we do a better job supporting our students of colors, how can we do a better job supporting students from marginalized communities, and so to have you two here as kind of what it looks like for that student success plan to work, for this place to become a home where you feel supported. That's the goal. That's the goal for every student. And so that's kind of, what we work towards.
Yes.
Did you want to add something?
Yeah, kind of on that topic. When I came on my tour, I had a one-on-one with President Reinders,
Yes.
and he had looked me straight in the eye, and he knew I was committed to Iowa State, and simply said, "I hope you have realized this is a hidden gem." And wasn't trying to sell me. Honest conversation. Had let me know if I went
That's
to Iowa
how he
State.
gets you.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a
yeah,
mind
it is.
games,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. And he's like, no pressure. You stay at Iowa State, but let's stay in contact. And I've realized that it is a hidden gem, and
Yeah.
coming towards graduation, not to get sappy, but it makes you sad to want to leave.
Yeah.
But it makes you so much more excited to come back and to be a professional and start thinking of ways of how can I support this community going forward. And I'm so excited for the new leadership as well, because I
Yeah.
have full faith in Dr. Mosley. Met with him a few times, so I'm excited.
Yes, yeah. And I think, that is a really nice way to tie in the fact that, President Reinders will be retiring this summer, but he really does take a personal interest in so many of the students here. And I think it makes an impact,
Huge.
I think when people hear about that on the outside, they're like, oh, okay, really? Your president talks to your students? And it's like, no, I'm serious. Like, it's real. He, wants to talk to you. He wants to invest in your future. He wants to know what you're doing. And I got the same feeling from Dr. Mosley when we had the opportunity to talk with him as well. I think that transition of leadership will be really wonderful. And I think, John, I've heard this said that, when President Reinders was leaving, he was like, I want to leave Morningside in a place where the John Reinders of 1999 couldn't even get an interview. And I think he's done just that. He has built a place, that has had such transformation and such success and has attracted such different students than we probably had 22 years ago when he was first came. And I think Dr. Mosley can only take that to another level.
Yep.
So, yeah, that's really wonderful. One, I wanted to touch on this with Sage and Jemar, too. We've had kind of a resurgence of student groups on campus who have really wanted to be vocal advocates and allies for marginalized groups, for students of color, for international students. I think of our Diversity, Openness, and Togetherness group, which is led by sophomore Camry Miranda, and also our Gender Undone group, which I believe is advised by Val Hennings.
Yeah.
So we just have a lot of great opportunities. And it's like you said, Sage, even if you can't get to all the meetings, just knowing that these opportunities exist kind of makes you feel like, this is a community I'm proud to be a part of.
Right.
So when you guys think of what else we could do, are there any sort of initiatives or events that come to mind that you've seen at other places where you're like, oh, that would be a great thing for Morningside to do? Or even, things like more panels, more speakers, opportunities like that.
Jemar? Well, I guess, so we did it, I think it was my freshman year before COVID, or after COVID, I guess. But I think we did in the CAF, they had cultural food days, and we do those sometimes, but I think I'd like to see those a little bit more often, because I love it. And it's not just about it doesn't have to be necessarily Black soul food or anything like that, but on St. Patrick's Day we had traditional Irish food, and I like being able to eat all those different foods, not to mention we have a huge international student population. And I think it would help, like you said, we want everyone to feel at home here. And I think it would make me feel at home more if there was a day we have German food or we have food from the Netherlands or Denmark.
Absolutely.
I think that would be pretty inclusive for them to be like, oh, okay, it's not just I'm on this campus, but they actually care that I'm here.
Yeah.
And I think something like that would be really cool to see, as well as the students who, I've never been to Europe. I don't know what they eat over there. I think it would be very interesting to be able to enjoy a meal like that on my campus in Iowa and just get a little bit of a taste. I think it's interesting.
Yeah, and that's not the first time we've heard that. I mean, Andre and I actually just met with an international student recently, and she was talking about how actually she would love to do that.
Yeah.
She was like, oh,
Absolutely.
you know, she's from Venezuela, and
Yes.
she's like, I want to share my culture
Yes.
with people here who have maybe never learned anything about my country except for what they see in TVs and movies.
Exactly.
And that is one of those ways, something we can all bond over is
Right.
food. And so I think that's a wonderful idea.
Yeah.
That's
All right, Jemar, how are you going to top it?
Yeah, I know. I'm sitting here. I'm like, okay, Sage.
Jamar's like, I actually gotta go. So.
That's great. No, that's a great idea, and I liked that. I liked when we did that. I'm excited. One, I think Diversity in Siouxland panel may be here for the long run from the sounds of those on the ODK committee. So I'm excited for that. But in particular, when we're doing events, I think, you know, there's so many opportunities for those outside of diversity. But when we bring speakers on campus, other than just sitting and listening, I think it's the activities that go along with it,
Yeah.
the networking session, those that can interact, but then the opportunities that come after that, I think, as well. And so I think my encouragement would be connecting the students to the external opportunities and events outside of our campus. So I'm thinking of Juneteenth, Pride Month, Asian Hispanic.
I think we have there's the Asian Pacific Islander month is
Yeah.
in May, I
Hispanic,
believe,
yeah.
and then like Sioux City has an Asian festival. During
Asian
that
festival,
month as
that's what I
well.
was-
Yeah,
yep.
yeah.
And so, in regard to those, just pushing and encouraging and connecting students to those events, whether that be connected to our PID events, taking our classes to those events. And I know some are in summer, so we actually won't be here during that time. But that's probably one thing I would like to see.
Yeah.
But then another idea I had to represent and allow people to really express themselves is at graduation. I know some of the larger state universities do this, is with the cords. If you're from the Latinx community, the Asian community, the African American community, or the LGBTQ plus community, you have those cords that represent who you are. And I think what's important about that is if you've gone 4 years and expressed yourself on a college campus openly, you should be proud and represent that
Yeah, I love
when you
that.
enter into the real world. Because that's a hard thing to really do for some
Yeah.
people. And so to be able to do that sets precedents for others that are watching and be like, I could be that student and I want to be that student to stand and represent myself. So there's just a few ideas.
Yeah.
I don't have anything that would maybe top.
Well, I think it's funny that you said the thing about the cords because when I was in high school, our high school was explicit on you can only wear something that was issued by the high school at your graduation. We don't want to see anything like that. And my little own form of protest, silent protest. So I went to a Black Issues Forum when I was a junior, and they gave me like a multicultural sash, and I wore it. And I saw a couple teachers kind of look at me, and I was just like,
What do you
I mean,
do?
like,
Yeah.
and I think it's important, like Jemar was saying, to be able to express that. Like, I took time to go out, listen to all the speakers that were at this Black Issues Forum. It was something that I was interested in. It's a community that I'm a part of. I think I should be able to wear that
Yeah.
at my graduation. Not that Morningside's not like
Yeah.
allowing people to do that, but I think it would be.
But if we
We
encourage
could encourage
it.
it. Yeah, it would be nice to
Absolutely.
encourage it because I mean that's who you are.
Yeah.
Have one last idea,
Yeah.
and this would be in my wildest dreams, would to have a Morningside University hosted cultural festival. Is where we have all
I
the
love
students
that.
from around the country, wherever they're from, sexuality and gender, represent themselves through events, activities, food and drinks, because let's be honest, that's what us college
That's
students
what we
love.
like.
That's what brings us together.
Yes.
In all honesty.
Cut to the chase, Jemar. We know what you want. Yeah.
And so just to think of all these events around campus, bringing
Right.
in the external community, and to have students lead that, and to express themselves, I think would be awesome. So hopefully in maybe 2 or 3 years when I come back, I can come back for that. But yeah.
I love that. And I love what you said about, finding a way to really connect students with the stuff that's happening externally. Whether it's professional opportunities, like I know we've worked closely with Semhar, the first community inclusion liaison from the city, and she offers internship opportunities that have maybe never been available to students interested in that work before. But even, fun things like going to the Siouxland Asian Festival, which I want to say is May 14th. If I'm wrong, then just go Google it. But yeah, opportunities like that where I think, when students are on campus, sometimes you get a little bit insulated into only hearing about what happens on campus.
Yeah. Right.
And even if you don't plan to stay in Sioux City after your 4 years, that's no reason why you can't get involved involved and enjoy yourself while you're here, and go over to South Sioux and try some of the amazing like Somalian places and Mexican restaurants that they have over there, even if it's not 1 block away or something like that. It's like we all love Jerry's Pizza, but sometimes you got to try something new.
And I should, speaking of Semhar, give her credit because she had that idea of the chords, and so I was like, that resonated with me, and so I wanted to share that as well.
I love Semhar, so I'm actually not surprised.
Wanted to give her credit, and then pass the idea on to me. So
and that is a wonderful idea. And I think too, like what you mentioned, Sage, like these things with food, they really tie in on a bigger level. People think, like, oh, I'm just, I'm eating a meal. And it's like, no, but you're engaging with a culture that maybe you'd never engaged with before. That's such an easy way to open the door and become interested in learning more.
And that can bring about conversation in a more natural way because, like we touched on earlier, sometimes the conversation about race, diversity can feel awkward. But if I'm just having a meal with you, it's really not that awkward. It's a lot more relaxed, and I think that's a great way to bring it in because it doesn't have to be awkward. So
absolutely.
Well, Jemar, you touched on that at the beginning, saying I think sometimes when people hear about diversity, equity, inclusion, they assume you're talking about something political. It's not something political. We're talking about human rights. We're talking about human to human connection. And I think that's really what these initiatives and ideas and conversation are about. Is like at the end of the day, we're all just people trying to get along and get our 4-year college degree.
Better together, right?
Yes. Well, it wouldn't be a Morningside podcast if I didn't ask you two students, what has been your favorite Morningside experience so far? So whoever wants to go first.
Oh gosh, okay. I'll go first because Jemar's been here for 4 years, so he probably has a lot more memories to run through in his head. I would say homecoming. Homecoming is always amazing because the whole community seems to rally around Morningside. We have the different food vendors here, which they bring in like the food trucks, which I've never seen some of those food trucks ever before. And it's interesting to see them here try out all of their food. Homecoming I don't know, the whole campus is just happy. There's always events constantly happening from Morningside. Activities Council, they throw a bunch of different events throughout the week. And it just makes college feel a lot more fun. It takes the ease off of the stress of studying. Like, oh my gosh, I have this many classes this week, but there's an event on Thursday that I can go to. So I think it's a great way to de-stress, and that's why I love it, especially because homecoming's more towards the beginning of the year. And while it's not the rush of midterms and everything like that, it's still getting into the groove of, okay, I'm back on campus. I have to go to class and do my homework, but it's a great way to de-stress. And I really, really value that. So
yeah.
Well, I was going to say homecoming.
Jemar just so many memories.
That's okay. So yes, absolutely homecoming. I think what you said, Sage, and I won't go on a tangent. But yeah, bringing the community together and all the activities and having the majority of our campus in one place. You don't get that very often, maybe aside from graduation. And the interactions you get to have with people that you may otherwise not get to throughout the year. So that, as particularly this year after, the interruption of the last year, it was really enjoyable. For myself, I think business honors, which was most recent. So business honors is for those who want to do undergraduate thesis research. And so we went to New Orleans this year, and after months of hard work, being able to present that and get feedback and have your hard work rewarded through travel and being able to go experience a new place that you maybe otherwise would not or have not gone to was a great trip. And that was with Dr. Eastman, Marilyn Eastman. She's great. And so being able to have bonding time with her, again, that personal relationship, I think I'll cherish forever and amongst my peers. I had one more. I forgot. Oh, well, my time isn't done yet, and I'm quite excited for Belize. And so that's with Twyla and a handful of my peers. And so
that's a May term?
That is a May term.
Wonderful.
Yep, so it'll be a week after I graduate, and I think that is going to be the cherry on my Morningside experience.
That sounds like a really great rate.
So
I kind of regret that. I didn't do that when I graduated.
So I think that's going to be it. So those three collectively have probably been those things I'm going to take with me and cherish.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for being here today. I really appreciate you taking the time. I'm not as good as closing these as Alex is, so I guess follow us on social. Jemar graduates this spring, so keep an eye out for whatever amazing things he will be doing. I'm sure it will be a lot of things. Sage, you have 2 years to get it together, so let us know. And then Andre, I think that so many people already know you as a resource, and I hope that this let even more people know that we've got people here who are open to having these conversations and want to see more students succeed. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Carla.